Imagine for a moment a throne room, but not one of splendor and gold. This is a place of ruin, of dust, of time's cruel embrace. The banners that once hung in triumph now rot in the silence, moth-eaten and forgotten. The grand pillars, carved by hands long turned to dust, stand fractured and weary, their weight no longer a matter of stone, but of sorrow. The once great tapestries woven with stories of conquest hang in tatters, their meaning lost to time. The scent of decay lingers in the air, a reminder of the countless years that have passed. The floor, made of marble once polished to a mirror's sheen, is cracked and uneven, littered with fragments of a forgotten age. The chandeliers, once adorned with gemstones that glittered in the candlelight, now hang crooked, their chains rusted, their brilliance stolen by centuries of neglect. And at the center of it all, upon the throne of the forsaken, sits the king. But he is no longer a king, not in the way men understand. His crown, once the envy of lords and emperors, has melded into his skull, fused by the centuries that refuse to let him rest. His robes, woven from the finest silks, now drape his form like burial shrouds, clinging to a frame too thin, too ancient, too wrong to still be alive. His fingers, long, skeletal, drum against the armrests, though there is no sound. There hasn't been sound in a very, very long time. The silence is oppressive, pressing down upon him like the weight of eternity itself. He has sat unmoving for so long that even the dust hesitates before daring to settle upon his motionless form. He has forgotten his name, but names are fickle things. They are given, taken, rewritten, erased. Names are for the living, and the king, if he can even be called that, has not lived for centuries. He has become something else, something beyond death yet deprived of life, a relic, a phantom bound to a realm that has long since forgotten him. The air is thick with the whispers of a past he cannot recall, echoes of voices that once called him by a title now lost to oblivion. He reaches for them in the stillness, but they scatter like ash in the wind. Yet, he waits. For what? He does not remember. For whom? He cannot say. Time has gnawed at his mind like a starving rat, leaving only scraps of thought, fragments of memories that no longer fit together. He remembers war, though he cannot recall the faces of his enemies. He remembers love, though her name has long since been devoured by the silence. He remembers betrayal, though the dagger in his back turned to rust long before his body refused to decay. Faces flash before him, shadowy and indistinct, slipping through his grasp like water through clenched fingers. Were they friends? Were they foes? He cannot be sure anymore. He reaches into the depths of his shattered memory, grasping at the remnants of the life he once had, but all he finds is emptiness. And so, he waits. The castle, once the heart of an empire, now stands as a monument to nothing. No kingdom claims it, no history speaks of it, no maps mark its location. It has been swallowed by the world, erased from the memory of men, leaving only the king to linger in its forgotten halls. His throne, a seat of authority long since meaningless, remains the only constant in this decaying void. The corridors stretch endlessly, filled with empty chambers where voices once rang, where laughter once echoed. Now, there is only stillness, an eternal quiet that not even the passage of time dares to disturb. The wind does not howl through the broken windows. The world has abandoned this place entirely. But something stirs. For the first time in countless years, the air shifts. The dust, undisturbed for centuries, begins to dance in patterns unseen, swirling in ghostly tendrils as if whispering forgotten secrets. The silence, thick and suffocating, shudders as something presses against it, something vast, something inevitable, like the first ripple upon still water before the storm. The very bones of the castle seem to sense it, the aged stone groaning, protesting, resisting the disturbance after so many lifetimes of quiet. The king's hollow eyes lift from the empty expanse of his kingdom to the great iron doors at the end of the hall. They stand tall and foreboding, their surface scarred by the weight of time, their edges etched with runes long since faded. The doors tremble, as though waking from their own slumber, their heavy mass shifting slightly, begrudgingly acknowledging the force that dares to disturb them. The hinges, rusted and weary, strain against their burden, whispering in slow, aching creaks, the sound echoing through the vast chamber like the murmur of forgotten ghosts. A faint sound reaches him, the whisper of footsteps, hesitant yet deliberate, echoing through the chamber like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat long thought lost. The cadence is slow, purposeful, neither hurried nor uncertain. It is the stride of something that knows it belongs, of something that has come to claim what was once abandoned. The king's skeletal fingers tighten against the throne's armrests, the smallest motion sending cracks spiderwebbing across the brittle stone. The air grows heavier, thick with the weight of what is to come, a presence unseen yet undeniable, seeping into the chamber like an unstoppable tide. And still, the footsteps continue, growing nearer with each measured step, each one more resolute than the last. The castle listens, the walls seem to hold their breath, and the king, for the first time in eons, waits for what is to come. Someone is coming, and for the first time in eons, he remembers what it means to feel. A forgotten pulse beats within his chest, a sensation alien yet familiar. His fingers, long motionless, twitch against the armrests. The weight of eternity shifts, just slightly, as the presence draws nearer. Is it a challenger? A lost soul who stumbled upon the ruins of his dominion? Or is it something else, something that has remembered what the world has tried so hard to forget? The king does not know. But for the first time in a millennium, anticipation sparks in the void where his heart used to be. The iron doors creak, the sound reverberating through the hollow halls like the groan of a dying beast. Dust cascades from the rafters, swirling in ghostly spirals before settling on the ancient stone floor. The hinges scream in protest, long rusted and unused, their echoes stretching into the vast emptiness beyond the throne room. The king leans forward, just slightly, and the motion is enough to send cracks splintering through the brittle stone of his throne. The movement, small as it is, sends a whisper of forgotten power through the chamber, stirring the stagnant air with its presence. The light that spills from the opening doorway is unlike anything he remembers. Soft, golden, warm. It reaches across the floor in slow tendrils, creeping over the broken flagstones, defying the gloom that has reigned for countless centuries. It does not belong in this place of ghosts and echoes. It is an intruder, an aberration in his eternal night. And yet, for all its warmth, it carries with it something else, something unspoken but undeniable, a challenge, an invitation, a reckoning long overdue. Yet he cannot look away. The presence moves closer, and the king, for the first time in centuries, moves as well. His hands grip the throne, his knuckles tightening, his body adjusting to the unfamiliar motion. The silence, once his only companion, is now an obstacle, something that must be broken. He watches, unblinking, as a figure steps through the doorway, their silhouette outlined against the glow beyond. He should feel rage, he should feel fear, but instead there is only one thought that consumes him, one desire that claws its way to the surface after so many years of dormancy. He must remember, and as the figure steps closer, the room itself shivers in recognition. The walls seem to breathe, the rafters groan, and time itself hesitates. The past and the present collide in the vast emptiness of his forgotten domain. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, stretching across the floor as if bowing in deference to the presence that has entered. The air is thick with energy, charged with something ancient and unspoken. The very bones of the castle seem to remember, aching under the weight of their buried truths. The king, now standing, feels the weight of something greater than himself pressing in from all sides. Memories both his and not his return in pieces, fragments forming a mosaic of truths long buried. Images flicker in his mind, battles fought in distant lands, the voices of those who once swore fealty to him, the whisper of a promise made in another age. And with each fragment, the walls themselves seem to whisper back, as if they, too, recall a time before the silence, before the ruin, before oblivion. A tremor ripples through the room, sending cascades of dust spiraling from above. The echoes of the past grow stronger, not mere specters of memory, but tangible, real. The figure before him, this intruder, this harbinger, stands at the threshold of something vast, something dangerous. And the king, for the first time in centuries, feels something more than remembrance. He feels inevitability. Then, something sharp pierces the silence. A single word, his name, and suddenly, the void of his mind is no longer empty. The walls tremble, the pillars shudder. Time itself stirs as the castle remembers. For the first time in centuries, the forgotten king is awake, and the world will remember his name. But the world has changed, and so too has the king. And as he rises, the very air shifts around him. Shadows stretch long, bending to his will. The dust settles, awaiting his command. And with a single step, the world trembles. For the forgotten king is forgotten no more. Beyond the broken doors, beyond the ruins of his once glorious kingdom, the world stretches out before him, vast and unfamiliar. The stars above seem different, colder, more distant, as if they, too, had forgotten his name. The air carries new scents, unfamiliar and foreign, whispers of life that had thrived in his absence. Distant lights flicker on the horizon, remnants of civilizations built atop the bones of his fallen empire. He steps forward, the ground beneath his feet no longer the sacred stones of his dominion, but something else, something changed, something altered by the inexorable passage of time. The wind howls past him, carrying voices that speak in tongues he does not recognize, laughter and song woven into its currents. Towers of glass and steel rise far beyond the hills, structures unknown to his world, creations of those who had claimed this land in his stead. For centuries they had built, expanded, flourished, unaware of what lay dormant beneath the ruins of their own histories. They had forgotten him, dismissed the myths, buried the warnings beneath layers of progress and arrogance. But their time of ignorance was over. He clenches his skeletal fingers, feeling the remnants of his power stir within him, a force as old as the stars themselves. They may have forgotten, but he had not. His kingdom had fallen, but it would rise again. The world had moved on, reshaped itself, adapted in his absence, but it would learn to kneel once more. He would carve his name into the very fabric of existence, so that no future would ever dare forget. A cold wind rises, swirling around him, carrying echoes of a past that still lingers just beneath the surface of time. He can feel the weight of forgotten oaths, the whispers of 1,000 lost voices carried on the air. The world does not yet know it, but it is already bending to his will. With every breath, the balance shifts, the shadows lengthen, the sky darkens just slightly, as if even the heavens tremble at his return. The bones of the land call to him, the deep veins of power that once fed his empire still pulsing beneath the surface, waiting for his touch. He stretches his hand outward, and the ground quivers. The stones at his feet crack, the very earth recoiling, then yielding, remembering the weight of his presence. The cities of men gleam in the distance, their towers reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers, oblivious to the storm now stirring beneath their foundations. He does not rush. He has all the time in the world, and time itself bends to those who command it. He will not take his throne by brute force alone. No, there is a deeper satisfaction in making them realize what they have forgotten, in watching the knowledge dawn in their eyes like a long-buried truth resurfacing from the abyss. He will remind them with whispers before he crushes them with storms. He will teach them reverence before he demands obedience. And when they kneel, when they bow, as they once did, he will not be merciful. Mercy is for the living, and he is something far greater. The forgotten king steps forward, and with him, history itself stirs. The land, the sky, the very air seems to tremble at his presence. For in the great and terrible expanse of time, kings may rise and fall, but gods are eternal. The forgotten king steps forward, and with him, history itself stirs.